Ready to beat Donald Trump again? I'm Jessica Denson, and this is Lights On. As though we needed more reasons to cast Trumpism to the ash heap of history, last night author Michael Wolff unveiled an 11th-hour bombshell about Donald Trump and Jeffrey Epstein. We're going to get to that. But let me just first address how I think a lot of us are feeling right now. First of all, do not be complacent for 1 second in the next 4 days, but do, my friends, be confident, because we are very much on track to beat him again. But if it feels like an insult, an imposition that we're even being put through this, you are definitely not alone. We defeated this man handily in 2020. He turned what was supposed to be a red wave in 2022 into a red drip and has made countless MAGA Republicans lose their primary races. The only reason Donald Trump announced his candidacy after 2022 was to stay out of jail and financial ruin for his theft of classified documents, his deadly attempt to overthrow American democracy, and what he knew would be massive indebtedness to one of the many women he's assaulted and the state his business defrauded for years. The most cowardly and nihilistic figures in media, politics, and now business, I'm looking at you, Elon Musk, have rehabilitated a man that we massively rejected for violating us all. The Supreme Court is already in fascist territory. They rejected the 14th Amendment of our Constitution, which bans this insurrectionist from even being a candidate. And then they did the unthinkable and said that some of his crimes were official and thus immune from prosecution. So you are right if you feel that we have most certainly been failed by the institutions that are supposed to protect us. So with all of these circumstances that we should not be facing and are very frankly unfair, it falls on us, the American people, to once again be our last line of defense between freedom and fascism. We have to go up against a candidate who in the waning days is literally musing about the firing squad that could kill his political enemies. It really is an insult. But let me humbly suggest that we take this task that is once again on our shoulders as a badge of honor. We get to live in a moment in history where we again reject decisively everything that Donald Trump represents, clean up the filth that he has left behind, and move forward in a free world. The responsibility is enormous, but the reward is priceless. When democracy is saved, and not just for us, by the way, the whole world is watching and waiting for what we do, it will be because we did it for ourselves. Nobody did it for us. Thank you very much. Think about that in 4 days. What an incredible honor for each one of us. So everybody, welcome to this final, I cannot believe it, this final pre-election episode of Lights On. I'm Jessica Denson. If you know me, you know me. If you don't, I'm an ex-Trump aide who spent the last 7 years of my life in court to defeat the illegal silencing, mass censorship that this man tried to use to silence his critics. And I came out on the other side, and I've been issuing warnings for years. And it feels sometimes like Groundhog Day, like, oh my God, why do I have to do this again? But it's life, isn't it? To just, one of my favorite writers, Mary Baker Eddy, says, repeating and defeating, repeating and defeating. And I really have just had that as the last several weeks have felt for me, and I think for a lot of us, like such a roller coaster of emotions and anxiety and anticipation. I just keep coming back to what an honor it is, and to really love ourselves, so much that we save our democracy for us. It's really not about Donald Trump or even about Kamala Harris. It's about what each one of us is doing for ourselves, because we love ourselves and our country and one another enough. So I want to start, as I promised, with this bombshell news from Michael Wolff, the author who has put out very revealing books about Donald Trump and his White House starting very early on. But just to set this up, how Donald Trump is an affront to women really is the backdrop for how he is an affront to all of us. But to set up how Donald Trump violated women that we're going to learn more about from Michael Wolff today, I just want to remind you what he said this week when asked or when giving a speech about protecting women. Here is what Donald Trump said.
President, I want to protect the women of our country. They said, sir, I just think it's inappropriate for you to say, pay these guys a lot of money. Can you believe it? I said, well, I'm going to do it whether the women like it or not. I'm going to protect them.
Okay. This, of course, is an adjudicated sexual abuser who has been credibly accused by dozens and dozens of women of sexual assault. He is responsible for appointing the justices that overturned Roe versus Wade, and he has the gall to go out on the campaign trail and in debates and say that most of the country wanted Roe versus Wade to be overturned. He has called his abortion bans a, quote, beautiful thing to watch. There is a ProPublica report out just today about yet another horrific story of a young woman dying. This was a teenager in this instance, a teenager in Texas named NAA Crane. And she was in excruciating pain, very, very weak, bleeding, feverish and vomiting, went to two different emergency rooms where they were basically just passing around and not giving her the medical care that she needed, the reproductive care that she needed because of the position that states like Texas, these fascist, extreme, right-wing states that are attacking women's bodily autonomy, the position they have put doctors in. And this young woman died shortly thereafter. So Donald Trump calls his abortion bans a beautiful thing to watch and says that he is going to protect women. A sexual predator says and did you hear the way he said that, whether they like it or not? Did you hear him? Every woman, father, mother, sister, brother, human should be outraged at the prospect of this man ever again having any influence over our laws, or God forbid his second in command, J.D. Vance, who we know has absolutely no respect for women whatsoever. He thinks they should all be nannies or stay-at-home moms. So let's get to Michael Wolff and what he revealed last week. And I just want to say this about Michael Wolff before I even tell you, because this was one of my first questions. Like, why are we just hearing about this now? Is he holding this as like the final October surprise? And he actually just tweeted out about an hour ago. He said, FYI, over the past number of years, this material has been offered to most major broadcast outlets. None were interested in pursuing the story. I'm like, Michael Wolff, I think I can relate a little bit to your attempt to get the story told by major broadcast outlets. If you watched last week's show, you know what I'm talking about. But the bottom line is he has this absolutely shocking but not surprising information about Donald Trump and Epstein, where he had numerous, he says he has hundreds of recordings of talking to Jeffrey Epstein. And what he reveals is just how afraid Donald Trump was of what Epstein had on him. One of the things that Michael Wolff says Epstein showed to him were photographs of Donald Trump with topless young women sitting in his laps. I'm hesitant to even read this description to you, but I'm gonna try to get through it. It says, in some of the pictures, they're sitting in his lap, and then there's one I especially remember where there's a stain, a telltale stain on the front of Trump's pants, and the girls are pointing at him and laughing. And a lot of this, what Michael Wolff has gone through in his in a podcast, and his podcast host James Truman asked Wolff in this podcast, where are these pictures? Where are these pictures of Donald Trump and Jeffrey Epstein and these young women? And Wolff suggested that they may be among the items that were taken by the FBI, notably when Bill Barr was in charge of the Justice Department. Michael said, quote this, he would go and he would take them out of the safe. He's referring to Jeffrey Epstein when he was meeting with him. And then he would return them to the safe. And I would say it's likely that they would have been there when the FBI, Trump's FBI at that point, not to put too fine a point on it, raided Epstein's house and took the contents of the safe in 2019. You want to talk about a catch and kill scheme. It's really difficult to choose the biggest scandal in the Donald Trump era, because he is just a walking, living crime spree. But I do believe that he was truly feared no one more than Jeffrey Epstein. Michael Wolff talks about meeting with Steve Bannon and introducing Bannon and Epstein. And how, Bannon's out of jail again, telling Donald Trump how to steal the election this time, do it a few hours earlier on election night. But you got to realize how much dirt these people are afraid of that they have on one another, how much Bannon hated Trump when he first left the White House, and then cozied up to him so he would get pardoned for that build a wall scheme, and how much Donald Trump feared Epstein. He feared it. He feared him. What Epstein had on Trump, Michael Wolff is suggesting, makes the Access Hollywood tapes look like, child's play. He had a treasure trove of damning information about Donald Trump's sexual abuse of young women. A lot of people on this program constantly remind me about the woman who came out by the pseudonym Katie Johnson, who accused Trump and Epstein of violating her when she was 13 years old, and how that story just went away. And we all wonder what happened to Katie Johnson. What was she threatened? Why was she afraid to bring her story out? But never forget that Epstein was arrested all the years that the feds knew about him and about his activity. He was arrested and imprisoned during Donald Trump's presidency. We are supposed to believe that Jeffrey Epstein committed suicide in a Manhattan jail cell. Jeffrey Epstein's brother, for one, has gone on the record talking about how very unlikely it would have been for his brother, who is a known narcissist, very, very unusual for narcissists to commit suicide, to have taken his own life, especially in that very window of time. I don't remember the specifics as I'm sitting here right now, but I listened to this very long podcast of his brother talking about some kind of hearing that Epstein had coming up right before he was found dead. And this is just reported as fact that Jeffrey Epstein committed suicide under the supervision of Bill Barr's Justice Department. And we're supposed to believe this. I am not a conspiracy theorist. This one is just like glaring red flags. I don't believe it. So convicted or accused sexual predator, somebody has no doubt about his behavior. Jeffrey Epstein had all the dirt on his buddy, his frenemy, Donald Trump. And Donald Trump feared nobody more than this man. And he died in a jail cell during Donald Trump's presidency. This almost perfectly segues into my next story, which is about Donald Trump talking about how his political enemies could be executed. But it's the theme of my pitch is always, if you think you're on your good side now, his good side now, just wait. Just wait, Trump supporters. Epstein was someone who thought he was a friend, who was very, very close with Trump for years. And he died in a jail cell when he was president. The spectrum is so wide of all of the people who will be caught up and could be caught up in the snares of Donald Trump's retribution and the means and lengths he will be willing to go to silence his critics or those who expose his criminality, whoever they are. And Trump supporters, if you think you're exempt from that group, think again. But here is Donald Trump, as I mentioned in that open. We literally have to deal as if he's some normal candidate where we're just talking about the economy, which, by the way, another huge Economic Times report came out this week and said the economy is going to be great. Whoever gets elected president, they're going to inherit a great economy. So who set up that economy? Biden-Harris set up that economy. Who's going to sabotage it? Trump and Elon Musk, who told you this week that, yeah, you are going to experience hardship. Elon Musk just said the quiet part out loud. You're going to experience hardship in the beginning of a Trump administration. But we're supposed to think we're dealing with two candidates with regular issues in an election, and you literally have got the one guy talking about a firing squad killing his political opponents. Here's the clip.
Let's put her with a rifle standing there with 9 barrels shooting at her, okay? Let's see how she feels about it. You know, when the guns are trained on her face.
When the guns are trained to her face. Now, MAGA is trying to say that he was talking about it in the context of Liz Cheney being a war hawk and, you know, just something about like maybe getting a taste of her own medicine or something. Sorry, no, you don't get to put out the imagery of someone who you have said should be subjected to military tribunals and discuss rifles being trained on her face and us not think that that is a threat. By the way, that comment was made to Tucker Carlson in Arizona. Attorney General Mays of Arizona is investigating that comment. He said, quote, "I have already asked my criminal division chief to start looking at that statement, analyzing it for whether it qualifies as a death threat under Arizona laws." I want to go to a guy named Rick Steves, who actually does tours of Europe. He knows a lot about history, a lot about Europe. And he put out this clip on Twitter about what he was taking a tour of in Berlin, talking about how many people don't realize that the first people Hitler sent to his concentration camps were not everyday Jewish citizens, but his political opponents. Clear, stark warnings for us. Here's Rick Steves.
In Berlin, I'm standing in front of the People's House here. That's the Reichstag. And Berlin is so steeped in history, and you got to be thinking of their nightmare with fascism. And you know, Hitler was elected to their parliament, and he was part of a coalition, and his party was in the minority, but he ended up legally becoming the chancellor and then the dictator because he just wanted to be dictator for a day. And there was a handful of people in here who opposed Hitler, refused to do the proper salute, refused to kiss his ring and wear his uniform. And these were the Kinzingers, the Liz Cheneys, the Mitt Romneys, the Charles Schumers, and so on of German democracy in 1932. Well, 95 of them or something like that were arrested as soon as Hitler took power. These are the representatives and the senators of Germany that were sent to concentration camps, the first concentration camps in 1934. And what is striking to me that I just learned is most of these, generally people died after a couple of years. These people were kept alive until 1945. 1945. Hitler kept them alive, the leaders of the political opposition against him, until it was pretty clear that he was going to lose the war. And then, in 1945, these courageous politicians in Germany who stood up against fascism were murdered by that guy. Think of what can happen to a society that doesn't take the threat of autocracy seriously and doesn't value how fragile and precious democracy is. Oh my goodness. I learned so much when I...
Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. I actually last week meant to put a clip of Eminem, which Eminem, of course, if you remember, was on the campaign trail with Kamala Harris last week. And with all I was thinking about, I forgot this clip, but it fits perfectly here. And I want to play it again because to me, especially because I have lived the playbook of Trump retribution, it's something that people don't, like Rick Steves was saying, you don't realize how precious and fragile democracy is, and you don't realize how bad it's going to be when you lose it. Just the ways in which people's lives can be affected for literally speaking their mind. That is why, for all of our deep, deep flaws and injustices, we are the freest country in the world, the city that is set on a hill, why people come here for freedom and refuge from political persecution. We could be on the cusp. I don't think we're going to lose, but we are on the deciding line of whether we continue to be that city on a hill or whether we start having to flee our own country to flee retribution. I thought Eminem took his few minutes up there at that podium to highlight the perfect issue. Here you go.
I also think that people shouldn't be afraid to express their opinions. And I don't think anyone wants an America where people are worried about retribution or what people will do if you make your opinion known. I think Vice President Harris supports a future for this country where these freedoms and many others will be protected and upheld.
Yes, she does. Yes, she does. And we have, we're not, this coalition that has come together, I highlight on the show every week, there are many Republicans that we are not all 100% on the same page with every policy. I'm very transparent with you about being totally disgusted and dismayed by our policy with unconditional support for Israel that is, frankly, as we're going to discuss briefly at the end of the show, not in the defense of the Israeli people. It's only in the defense of power-seeking criminal Benjamin Netanyahu. So we can have differences of opinion, but one thing we can know in a Kamala Harris administration is that if we go out on the street and protest one of her policies legally, we're not going to be thrown behind bars or maybe even, like some of our Muslim and Arab friends, deported from this country. So we will have the freedom, we will retain the freedom to speak without being censored about our government's wrongdoing and not fear being thrown in jail for it. I want to keep today's show tighter than usual because I want you guys to be active, use these next 4 days, not spend too much time on YouTube, even though I hope you will share the warnings and the calls to action that we have today. But I'm going to keep it tight. So let's go to our sponsor, break for our sponsor, got some other amazing, excellent content on the other side. So this week, Vice President Kamala Harris gave a closing argument on the ellipse that was widely reviewed as pitch perfect. I had some friends there, including Sergeant Aquilino Gonell, who has been on this program many times. He was reporting back to me as the event was going on. And I really appreciated, in particular, this clip. It just, highlights the stakes like we're doing every single time we do this show, about the unbelievable threat that we have in front of us and how it falls on us to defeat it. And we must. Here is Kamala Harris very eloquently laying out the stakes.
And those who came before us, the patriots at Normandy and Selma, Seneca Falls and Stonewall, on farmlands and factory floors, they did not struggle, sacrifice, and lay down their lives only to see us cede our fundamental freedoms. They didn't do that only to see us submit to the will of another petty tyrant.
Yeah, you think about the sacrifices that have gone before us. Hell no, we will not cede our freedom to the will of this petty tyrant, Donald Trump, and all of the petty, soulless cowards that surround him and have propped him up and forced him back into our lives when we rejected him before. I wanted to share something that Aquilino actually put out today on Twitter. He was there, as I mentioned. Another person that spoke was Craig Sicknick, the brother of Brian Sicknick, who we've also had on the show, and lost his brother because of Donald Trump. Donald Trump has the gall to say nobody died that day when he literally killed his own supporters and others. And as I will remind people, there have been so many suicides in the wake of that because of the unthinkable burden that was put on those officers that day. And I just wanted to share that Aquilino said today on Twitter, he said there have been additional police, Capitol police officer suicides just in the last few months. And I like what he said because I've felt this way in a degree. Like I mentioned at the top, I think a lot of us are feeling this. He said, this election cycle is pushing many over the limits of what they can mentally endure. Please check in on your veteran friends and family and let them talk about what is stressing them. If you're worried about a veteran or a veteran who needs help, please don't wait until it's too late. Call the Veterans Crisis Line at 988 and press 1 immediately. I would just extend that to anyone in your family that you might think, or yourself. I shared on Instagram. I was never on any social media before Trump threw me into this mess, but I'm now on everything. So I shared on Instagram a few weeks ago how I really just the chaos and the lies and the confusion and the sickness of this election cycle and what we have to deal with, I thought really got to me. And I had to take some time for myself to just re-energize and recenter and not be thrown off. And I think we all need that. So my message today, as much as it is understanding the stakes and keeping the pedal to the metal in the next 4 days, love yourself and take care of yourself and check on friends and strangers. Never know how much you can affect a stranger just by a kind word or deed. So definitely keep that in mind in the next 4 days and beyond. God knows we're going to need it. We're going to need each other. But you've got the split screen of the beautiful message of respecting the sacrifices of those who came before us from Kamala Harris. And then you've got the split screen of Donald Trump putting his closing argument in the same place that the Nazi Americans held a rally in the 30s, echoing identical rhetoric to what the Germans said in the 30s. They said, Germany is only for Germans. Stephen Miller said, America is only for Americans. They platformed a comic, As You Know, who called Puerto Rico a floating island of garbage and used sick, vile, sexual imagery to describe immigrants coming into our country. And then Donald Trump called that closing argument event a love fest, very similar to how he has called January 6th a day of love. So those are the choices. And what is the very thankfully positive result of seeing these split screens? You have people who even until recently were duped and buying into the notion that Donald Trump could be good for them in any way, shape, or form, fleeing. In particular, Puerto Rican voters who are very critical in the swing state of Pennsylvania. Everybody, if you're watching the news, you hear it all the time. Pennsylvania goes one way, that's the election. So Pennsylvania could not be more important. A lot of Puerto Ricans in Pennsylvania. Here is one of them who was going to be voting for Donald Trump and changed her mind after that Madison Square Garden rally.
Jean Marie Lugo has lived in Philadelphia for 20 years. She says she was leaning toward voting for Trump until now.
It was a day that changed everything. I finally said, no, I have to be in the right side of the history.
Thank you. Thank you. And thank you to everybody who is understanding, even if it takes it until Tuesday. If I voted early. I voted for Kamala Harris. I strongly encourage, if you have your ballot, vote early, check it, make sure it's in. But if you haven't voted yet, if there's anybody out there, they have until November 5th. If they are leaning or undecided, to take that stand on the right side of history and have that honor and that dignity and that credit, frankly, for saving democracy that's going to come with it when we all do the right thing. So beautiful to see people like her. Even, of course, you heard a lot probably about the reggaeton singer Nicky Jam, big celebrity, Puerto Rican celebrity, rescinding his endorsement of Trump. But just to see regular Puerto Rican citizens coming out with the clarity after having that moment. I certainly had my moments. It wasn't immediate for me. Somebody in the comments said, Jessica, why did you go to work for Trump in the first place? The answer to that is the inundation and overexposure that I had to Fox News for basically 8 years, basically for the entire Obama presidency, and how I was made to fear and demonize Democrats. And as a result of my right-wing news echo chamber, how I was shielded from the worst of Donald Trump. And then when I saw and heard some of his more abhorrent things that were very public, like the mocking of the reporter, the disabled reporter, which, yes, frankly, should have ended his campaign, or, mocking of John McCain, I knew these things were bad. This is the thing. I did have these angel voices. I knew they were bad, and I dismissed them. I looked past them because I had been told that the alternative, the Democrats, were so very dangerous, and we needed some strong outsider to take them on. So it was a bunch of garbage, bunch of bull. I bought it. A lot of people, sadly, they are still, the mental malpractice from Fox News and the like, you cannot overstate the impact that it has on people. It's 24/7 working to mess with people's minds and their perception of reality, their clear thinking. So that's the answer. It's what it was for me, and it's why we have any portion of this country that still follows him. But I woke up. I had my moments like she had her moments, and it was gradual. It started with the Muslim ban on day 4 of Trump's administration, which I always thought was just a campaign ploy that he'd never actually do. And it was a gradual watching how destructive his administration was, in particular to public servants like Andy McCabe and Marie Yovanovitch and Alex Finman, who were just there to help our country. And I had been sabotaged in my work in his campaign. I didn't connect it with him, the man. I connected it with the hateful, misogynist people that sabotaged me and were jealous of my very quick rise in the ranks. It took watching the horrors of his administration to say, oh, this rot comes from the top. And by the way, those people that sabotage me, the worst of the worst, they're the ones that are lining up for Project 2025. They were the ones that were brought in the 11th hour in Trump's administration by John McEntee. So they are the worst. They are the worst who are going to be in a, God forbid, second Trump administration. So anyway, since I'm talking about my own experience right now, I want to share with you something that one of you flagged for me. Thank you, Ellen, by the way. And that's this story about Elon Musk, who we know is out there doing very legally questionable things to try to help Donald Trump get elected with his millions and billions of dollars. And he has this, as you know, PAC called the America PAC. And underneath that umbrella is something called blitz canvassing, that is hiring door knockers to go out and knock on doors. Well, apparently a lot of these people that were hired by blitz canvassing had no idea that they were going out on behalf of Elon Musk and by extension, Donald Trump. There's a story that came out that says that workers working for blitz canvassing were tricked and threatened as part of Elon Musk's get out the vote effort. And not only were they tricked and threatened, they were literally put in very unsafe working conditions. They were flown to Michigan, driven in the back of a U-Haul, and told they had to pay their hotel bills unless they met these unrealistic quotas of knocking on doors in very, very short spans of time. One of them said, I knew nothing of the job or of the job description other than going door to door and asking the voters who they are voting for. Then here's the clincher. I think why Ellen shared this with me. Then after I signed over an NDA is when I found out we are for Republicans and with Trump. Well, my friends, if there's anybody out there who was tricked or duped or hired by blitz canvassing and Elon Musk's America PAC, please consult legal counsel. One of the things that I argued when I first started fighting my NDA as a pro se litigant was the procedural unconscionability of the agreement. So I don't know what this NDA looks like that these people signed, but that's the first thing that came to mind when I saw that they were tricked into working for Elon Musk and Trump. I argued that my NDA there was an element of procedural unconscionability because they were trying to use it as an employment agreement to shove all of my claims behind doors into arbitration. And it was not an employment agreement. There was nothing that when I signed it, I would think, oh, here's an agreement to arbitrate my employment claims. And the judge sided with me. I won that motion kept all of my claims out of court. So that would be my first thought about that NDA. Is it procedurally conscionable or not? Not even to touch on the substantive conscionability, which is why we eventually invalidated the Trump NDAs, just because their terms were ludicrously broad, trying to silence people for the rest of their lives. But very good chance that there's some legal remedy for these people, and I hope that they take it and explore it. Here's I want to kind of spend just the rest of the show making sure you have all the tools to go into Election Day. Definitely, as I mentioned, vote early, check your ballot, make sure it's counted. I got the text yesterday morning that mine was counted. This is, I want to play this clip of election officials in Philadelphia. This particular circumstance just applies to the city of Philadelphia, but even if you're not in Philadelphia, I'm sure there's a similar circumstance in your locality where you can check your ballot, make sure it's not flawed. There's many, many, many ballots that come in that are flawed for some reason. You know, you didn't sign in the right place. You put your date of birth instead of the date of your sending or whatever. Just check, make sure your vote is counted. I love the way this Philadelphia election official put it. Here you go.
It's Halloween, but this is no trick. Your vote may be at risk of not being counted. The County Board of Elections has received thousands of flawed ballots. Over 150,000 Philadelphians have already returned their mail-in ballot. If this includes you, I want to thank you for being a voter and for showing up for our communities. But there is one more thing that you have to do. If you voted already, scan this QR code and make sure that you did not accidentally submit a flawed ballot. In fact, every Philadelphian should take a look at this list and search for their family members, friends, and neighbors. Do not let your loved one wake up on November 6th only to realize that their vote could not be counted. If you realize you returned a flawed ballot, don't worry. Everybody makes mistakes, but don't ignore it either. This election will be won or lost by a few thousand votes in our state, and we will be living with the consequences of this election for the rest of our lives. Do not wake up on November 6th with regrets. Take action right now to correct your ballot and make sure that your vote is counted. Go to a City of Philadelphia satellite election office ASAP to immediately receive a replacement ballot. Visit phila.gov/voting to find an election office near you. And if all else fails, go to your polling place on Election Day and cast a provisional ballot. Philly, I know that many of us have election fatigue. I'm getting there too, but we are so close and we cannot take our eyes off of the prize because those seeking to tear us down certainly will not. Thank you so much.
They will not. Another thing in that spirit, don't be intimidated. We're seeing some stories of some crazy stuff going on at polling places, machetes, fires in ballot boxes, threats. Don't be intimidated. Do not be intimidated. President Barack Obama tweeted out a voter protection hotline. If you go to Vote Save America, if we can put his tweet up on the screen, there's a list of voter protection hotlines for every state. Know your rights. Don't be intimidated. Obviously, don't get into an altercation, but stand up for anybody else who is being threatened, for election workers. Know that there is help out there. There's also so much law enforcement that understands the threats that we are posing, that we are being faced with in this election, and they are working overtime to keep this election secure. So absolutely don't be intimidated. Make sure your ballot is counted. And as that woman said, if your ballot isn't counted, if you mailed it in and it's not counted by Election Day, you don't get a notification, go on Election Day to cast that provisional ballot. Do whatever you can to have your voice heard, to make your mark. I want to end, before we end, with a very a video that's going to make you see what you have to look forward to. Before that, I want to take a minute. Because to me, it's the elephant in the room. It's what's making us feel like we have this duplicity about our clarity on democracy and human rights. You know, we have it when it comes to a country like Ukraine, who's facing the war crimes of Vladimir Putin, and yet we fund the war crimes of Benjamin Netanyahu. I just want to highlight some people who, as I did last week, have the most skin in the game and yet understand that their choice here is binary, that we have a fighting chance to advocate for justice in a Kamala Harris administration when the alternative is literally finishing the job, raising, when I say raising, I mean like flattening the Gaza Strip and putting up condos by Jared Kushner. Here's Muslims for Harris in Michigan, just briefly talking about how they know that Democrats have always been their allies.
Throughout my 22 years in county government, it's been Democrats that we've worked with. And we cannot forget that in this election. And when people say vote your conscience, I say vote strategically. The people that you see around this table here are some of the people you call when you have a challenge with government. And it's important that we have the right leadership in place to ensure that we can make those.
Yeah, it is critical that we have the right leadership in place. Don't be played. My Muslim friends, my Puerto Rican friends, Black friends, any demographic, white, Black, young, old, do not be played by this man. His promises to you are completely empty. I know. Tell your friends, tell your neighbors, respect yourself. Do not be played by this man. But, you know, especially with the issue in the Middle East, I really see this as disgusting and heartbreaking as it is that so many people have suffered. 43,000, and I think that's frankly a very low number of civilians have been killed in Gaza, and the hostages have not been returned because of this sick, selfish prime minister, right-wing fascist criminal that is leading the country of Israel. One thing that all this pain has done is it has exposed this kind of really broken relationship that we have to really set straight between the United States and Israel. And it's put this issue on the world stage in a way that I don't think it has been in generations. I want to highlight, as I usually do, this isn't a Muslim versus Jewish issue. It's not Palestinian versus Israeli. It's the people versus the crooks in power. This is the first progressive Israel group in the United States. They're called Partners for Progressive Israel, and they became this week the first U.S. Zionist group to call for a halt in offensive aid to Israel. They said, we recognize the state of Israel's right and need to defend itself. At the same time, we fully recognize the massive humanitarian disaster of death, destruction, and infrastructure collapse wreaked on the people of Gaza. This situation constitutes not only a humanitarian crisis, but also is fuel for the future instability, which, in the absence of a political strategy and agenda to end the fighting, return the hostages, and create viable, enduring security arrangements, inevitably will combust in future recurring cycles of violence. I think this was obvious to so many of us in the beginning of this, that just enacting a war of annihilation would obviously be harmful to Israel's long-term security. And it just underscores the bad faith of leaders like Netanyahu and his allies like Trump and Putin. So we have a clear choice. The choice is for the good of all people. It's not pitting us against each other. One choice is for all. The other choice is for a few, a very select few that are just trying to keep themselves in power and out of prison. So it's 4 days left, everybody. I just got to tell you before we wrap up this show, go back. If you're watching me for the first time, or if you missed last week, go back and watch last week's show. I said my piece. I'm not going to say anything else. I said my piece. I laid down my marker, and I want to thank all of you guys for being such amazing supporters as I did last week. Thank you for the videos you sent in. Thank you for the comments and for the encouragement. I read, I think, every single one of them. I wanted to thank some of you by name, but I didn't want to leave out people. So just know that I saw your beautiful comments. I saw your videos. I saw your direct messages. We're not going to let anybody stop us. I didn't let them stop me before. I'm not going to let anybody stop me now. It really, frankly, as was my theme from the top, just fuels me more to keep doing the work and to take the honor of that work that we are doing, that nobody has done for us, right? So to end today, I want to play this clip of a woman, a woman's reaction when Biden won, just to give you some preemptive encouragement for how you are going to feel on election night or in the days after, when we find out if we put in the work and pull out this victory that is ours to have. Here you go.
Votes that have just come in. Biden has been elected, Mika, and
tell us about it. Well, the president-elect of the United States, Joe Biden, has run for president 3 times, and the third time has turned out to be the charm. Not only the charm, but possibly the most consequential election of our lifetime.
We get to keep our Social Security and our Medicare.
He was born in Scranton, Pennsylvania, but calls Wilmington, Delaware, his home. At the age of 29, Joe Biden became one of the youngest people ever elected to the U.S. Senate, and that is where his...
And she's crying just because she got to keep her Social Security. I mean, I'm going to be crying because I don't have to flee my country or go to jail. So, I mean, the stakes are so incredibly high. I can only imagine the emotions that are going to flow when and if we win. We have everything on our side. We have it in our hands to take this over the finish line. Let's do it. By the way, one more thing before I wrap. I want to thank, I've made some hay about the media that has not acknowledged me, but there have been some amazing people out there in this fight who have, and I just want to name some of them and thank them. Lev Parnas, Aquilino Gonell, Sergeant Aquilino Gonell that I mentioned earlier, Lawrence Tribe, who has been a guest on this show so many times, Elizabeth Newman, who was an official in the Trump administration and has spoken out very bravely. I want to acknowledge Alva Johnson, who also has been speaking out, one of the very few who thankfully my NDA precedent saved from being buried in a mountain of legal debt, bogus legal debt to Donald Trump, and she has been speaking out and using her voice. The lawyers at Crew, who have graced Lights On so many times and showed us what extraordinary work they are doing to protect our democracy. So there are really so many allies that I have and you have by extension as part of this Lights On family. And I just want to thank all of them and acknowledge them. Nobody can stop us. So thank you everybody so much for joining me this week. Get out there, get off social media, watch save this, subscribe to Jessica Denson on YouTube. Please do that. If you're watching this on Midas Touch, please, when this video is over, go Google or search for Jessica Denson on YouTube, subscribe there. That's the way to make sure 100% you're always getting Lights On content. I always upload my videos there. And if you want to order Lights On merch, you can do that at thejessicadenson.com. We've got the Lights On shirts, the Lights On hats, which also have Harris Walls on the back. So you can get your merch there. And as always, guys, you can support my ongoing legal battle, which I am waiting for decisions to this day and anticipating a trial in New York State Court at thejessicadenson.com/donate. Thank you all so much. You all are amazing. Be strong. Love yourself. Take this massive badge of honor. And in 4 days, let's run over the finish line together. I love you all so much. Have a beautiful weekend and let your light shine.